Well, well. Mr. Redding. There's a note.
May I see it? Oh, thank you, Inspector. Yes, oh dear.
But why did poor Anne Prothero take her own life? Do you think she suspected that Redding had shot Prothero and couldn't live with it?
Oh, no. Oh, no, no, no. What she couldn't live with was the fact that she was the murderer. She killed her husband, you know.
Anne?
Oh, yes. Just as she told us she did. When, of course, we weren't meant to believe it. Oh, damn me. Is that the time? I think I will.
Miss Marple, you mustn't go. You must tell us what happened. Where is that wretched girl with the tea? Hello? Vicarage?
You'd better get on with that tea, girl.
No hurry.
You'll be glad to hear that Christopher Hawes has regained consciousness and is out of danger.
Oh, thank goodness for that.
Oh, yes, indeed, yes.
Oh, now do sit down, then. We're not going to let Miss Marple go to bed until she's explained everything.
Well, you see, I made the most dreadful mistake of underestimating young Mr. Redding. I thought we were dealing with someone whose crudity would eventually expose them. What I hadn't bargained for was being made to think it was someone not very bright when, in fact, he was extremely subtle. The double confession, pointing the finger too crudely at the real murderer, planting the Colonel's letter on eccentric Mr. Hawes and staging his suicide. Most clever. I think we've been extremely lucky, Inspector.
You see, what I still don't...
Oh, you want to know how they did it? Well, we have to go back to the morning of the murder. Mr. Redding waited till you've gone out, Vicar. Griselda was in London. It wasn't until you'd rearranged your room, Vicar, that I realized where Mr. Redding must have put his gun. He'd already immobilized your car, so the scene was now set. That evening, Mr. Redding telephoned you, pretending to be Mr. Abbott's neighbour, and you were out of the way. They counted on my being in my garden.
Good evening, Miss Marple.
Oh, good evening, Mrs. Prothero. The dress was selected with great care. She knew I was a noticing sort of person. But I could tell she hadn't so much as a handkerchief in the top of her stockings. Never mind a gun. The gun was silenced. But when it went off, Mrs. Price Ridley heard it. She believed she'd heard someone in her shrubbery. Sneezing, she thought. So she went upstairs to get a better view. Now, this was very unfortunate, as she was not there to connect the sound of the sneeze with Mrs. Prothero leaving the study and crossing to the studio to await Mr. Redding. It was a few minutes before he turned up. I nearly missed him, as a matter of fact, as I was at that moment occupied in another part of my garden. I didn't notice that he was not quite his usual self, but I should have been alerted by the fact that he waved to me. He'd never done that before. He wanted to be noticed, you see. Mr. Redding had set up one of the nesting boxes at the edge of the woods with a loudspeaker inside it. the wire running back to his tape recorder inside the studio. This was the wire that Bill Archer tripped over the night before the murder. At precisely 6:30, Mr. Redding switched on the tape recorder, and the final touch to this masterpiece of confusion was applied. The shot sounded odd, so it took my attention. Mr. Redding was relying on the fact that a gunshot inside a room which then echoed outside would sound odd. I don't think Anne Prothero ever recovered from what she'd done. In Mr. Redding's company, she might have forgotten occasionally, but I think she realized she'd destroyed her life. Oh, she had wealth and freedom, of course. She tried to save Lawrence Redding to the last. Well, I must say I'm glad she didn't succeed. That would never do.
Tea. Oh, and some of your rock cakes. How thoughtful of you.
Oh, my dear, do you think you should? In your condition?
I've always suspected you of keeping a broomstick under the stairs, Miss Marple. And now I know.
Griselda,
Yes, Len, darling.
what, I mean, condition?
A little Clement is forecast.
Oh, I say.
Yes, but what I still don't see is...
I say.
What?
Oh, I say.